Welcome everybody, this is Sankofa Community Affairs with Brother Salim Adofo. Today we have on the show the President General of the UNIA ACL, Baba Senghor Baye. How you doing, sir?
I'm fine. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Brother Salim.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's definitely a good thing.
One of the things I want to discuss, for those who may not know, what is the UNIA ACL?
The UNIA stands for the Universal Negro Improvement Association African Communities League, which was founded on August the 17th, by Marcus Garvey, 1914. It stands for Government for African People All Around the World. But in 1920, Garvey first came to the United States in 1916, the first convention for African people around the world was held in Harlem in 1920. That's when we established ourselves as official government of African people all over the world.
Now, when you say an official government,
well, most of the governments that are around are not really representing the interests of the people. We are basically a theocratic government, a government governed by universal law, not man necessarily, meaning positive principles. So because North, South, East, and West, when Garvey came into existence and the UNIA came into existence, we were going through all of the problems that we are confronted with still today. We felt we needed our own universal government for African people to govern us properly based on universal law.
All right, what are some of the accomplishments of the UNIA?
Well, the big accomplishment that most people know is Garvey got people to see that we needed to have pride in our ancient African history. We needed to know we came from kings and queens. We didn't come from the transatlantic slave trade. We're not property. We are human beings who built pyramids and did a whole lot of things. That's one major accomplishment. Then the direction of self-reliance and self-determination, which we still are struggling with that today. And that's why we find ourselves in the conditions we're in right now with our young people, and particularly Africans in not just North America, but all over the world, find themselves on the bottom of the rung because we've been oppressed for the last, some people say 800 years, 400, 500 years. We've been on the bottom because some other people have come along and created what we call monopoly capitalism and caused divisions amongst our people. So we've lost our great knowledge of ourselves, and we have lost the power that we once had because we traveled the world before the transatlantic slave trade.
Right. Well, Marcus Garvey was able to organize, let's say, millions of people. How was he able to do such a thing with no telephone, no Twitter, no Facebook?
Good question. Well, see, Garvey, it was the time period, most importantly, okay? Garvey, as a young man in Jamaica, saw the problems by reading, and then he traveled the world, and everywhere he went, he saw these problems. So it was the timing, though, the Jim Crow era, the era of the switch from the Republican to the Democratic Party in the early teens. Our people were tired of being sick and tired, not just in the United States. Colonialism was running rampant in Africa. The Caribbean was going through its trials and tribulations with control over the British and control over the Spanish and control over the French. And South America was going through similar struggles. So our people gravitated to the need to come together to do for self and kind.
What was the publication of the UNIA?
The Negro World was the actual, well, it was many because Garvey did many newspapers, but the most important one was the Negro World, which had the largest circulation of any newspaper, even today, for black people all around the world. Later on, it became the Garvey's Voice. In the, 1950 to be exactly. Some of the President Generals that came on after Garvey, they continued it and they changed it to the Garvey's Voice.
Now, how many different languages was it published in?
Well, the Negro World was published in 3 basic languages at the time, you know, of course, English, French, and Spanish. We are moving towards publishing in Portuguese and everything towards the future because we got African people who don't all speak English.
That's correct. So was the Negro World throughout South America? Was it in other parts of the
Negro World reached all around the world, but particularly in the eastern part of the world where it was banned because it was so powerful when the people read it. But sailors, despite it being bound, people who travel and sailors, they carried it anyway. In Africa, in the UK, and all over the world.
What were some of the businesses that the UNIA created?
The Black Star Line is one that a lot of people know of. We had the Negro factories, where we had the Black Doll factories. We had laundries. Some of the major things that we need to concentrate on controlling today, but the shipping line was designed to carry product from place to place. Of course, because people wanted to move from place to place, they went on the ships as well. So it was really set up for commerce, trade, and industry, but it was also used to transport people.
There were two elements that we were reading about in the UNIA. One was a set of nurses, and another one was...
Right, exactly. The Black Cross nurses was very popular because, and the Motor Corps, because women actually ran that, and some men were involved with the Black Cross nurses, because it was not just about health and wellness. It was also about social service and dealing with our elders, dealing with children. So we're bringing that back. The other one was very important, the Black Legionnaires, security. We have to secure ourselves from ourselves. And you know, today we have to secure ourselves from ourselves. But more importantly, we have to secure ourselves from other people. We never forgot what happened in Black Wall Street.
Speaking of that, is it true that Garvey at one point in time met with the Klan?
Yes. He went and told them that it was more trees in Africa than in the United States. So he sent a message to them that you got to be careful stringing up our people, because some of your people could get strung up in Africa. Most people think that that was a compromise, but actually it was a warning signal. See, and then also the Klan did not want us around either. So they wanted us out of here. And there was a bill that came along later on with a racist, it was the Bilbo bill, named after Senator Bilbo, where they wanted to ship us out of here. So it didn't just happen. That discussions didn't take place just with Abraham Lincoln. Those discussions continue to happen. And even today we have people we call expatriates, had repatriated back to Africa, got up out of here because they're tired of these conditions. But we know colonialism, as they call it today, neocolonialism, still exists in Africa and around the world.
Why do you think that the UNIA was so big at that time?
Well, at that time period, as I said, Garvey came and met with a lot of leaders and found out they were faking it, man. They were gaming on the people, and he saw that. He traveled 37 states in the United States. But Garvey was inspired to come here because of the works of Booker T. Washington at Tuskegee Institute. So he literally came here to learn how he could take Tuskegee all over the place, because he knew that how good we were with our hands. Booker T. Washington was famous for saying, cast your bucket down where you are. But he found out what was going on in the United States, and he was needed, so he ended up staying. Staying actually for almost 12 years, and 2.5 of those years he spent in prison.
Before we touch on, I want to touch on him going to prison, but you mentioned that they were conventions in Harlem.
Yes.
Can you describe some of those conventions?
Right, well, you know, historically we've always, as black people, when we were segregated, had our conventions. The UNIA was not different. We had large conventions last for a month. And many people came through Harlem, but 25,000 actually came through Madison Square Garden within that month. And it just so happens the red, black, and green flag was, I think, point 13 in the Declaration of Rights of Negro Peoples of the World, which is a lot of declarations that were made at that convention. And that convention had Africans from all over the world that came to discuss the problems that exist in their area. And the unique thing about Harlem is Harlem was a black mecca for us at that time. So they say the Harlem Renaissance. We like to say, same time the Harlem Renaissance was going on, the Garvey Renaissance was taking place.
Do you think that Marcus Garvey influenced the Harlem Renaissance?
Absolutely. All the artists. Well, first of all, let's don't forget, the whole concept of the Harlem Renaissance came from Howard University. Some artists were funded and decided that they wanted to create a way for those artists to get their art out, whether it was painting, whether or not it was writings, whether or not it was acting, whether or not it was singing. But they ended up going to Harlem. Harlem had the Cotton Club during them days and blackface and all like that. So not only black people, but white people were all into us because we the best entertainers on the planet anyway, right? And that's a fact that maintains itself. So that's how the Harlem Renaissance was established. At the same time, many other organizations were there, but I'd like to focus on our organization was influential in raising the consciousness up of those artists. And out of the Harlem Renaissance came far too many for us to name now. But some of them were actually Garveyites.
Now you mentioned that point number 13 was the flag.
Right, the red, black, and green flag was established as officially the government flag. People in the 60s, you know, it rose up, they call it a liberation flag. Well, we're not liberated yet, but we call it our government flag. Red is for the blood that's been shed, and it will be shed. Black is for the race that's us, and green is for the land.
Okay.
Now, people have traced that back to the Zing Empire. However, it was the Garvey movement that popularized the red, black, and green flag. And since then, people have taken it and gone every which direction with it. We say that's okay, but it's an official flag of African people.
Now, you said that he spent 2 years in prison?
Yeah, about 2.5
2.5
years, right? His sentence ended up being commuted by Calvin Coolidge, because technically, Garvey was, the criminals came at Garvey. Garvey was not a criminal. I mean, if you chase the history and find out why they put him in jail, it was all fabricated, okay? However, his sentence was commuted, and then his human rights were violated again, because as soon as he was taken out of jail, they ran him out of the country. Said he could never come back.
What was he locked up for?
Well, they locked him up for supposedly defrauding the public. See, you had shares that people paid for the Black Star Line, okay? An empty envelope was the only evidence, other than some other folks who were charged who did not end up going through a court process. They let them go, but they wanted Garvey. The campaign was Garvey must go. And Julian Mack, who was a member of the NAACP. Now, he wasn't black, but he was a member of the NAACP. He was Jewish, actually. He was the judge. So the whole campaign was political. And they used it, and it wasn't the first time. Garvey was shot at, he was shot. I mean, they knew that Garvey was a conscious-raising person, but he had a movement behind it. He had a plan, not just him as an individual.
Now, I do believe that this is where J. Edgar Hoover got his, cut his teeth at, right?
That's where he cut his teeth. And, you know, J. Edgar Hoover. Yeah, but he cut his teeth with the UNIA and trailing Marcus Garvey. In fact, there are tons of stories that have been written where UNIA people were bought off, threatened. You know, they did everything they could to get to Garvey. But the interesting thing we need to remember about Garvey was a common, everyday brother. I mean, he didn't have no big limousine.
Right.
He didn't, have no flamboyant clothes. But he created ways and means for our brothers and sisters to work for themselves and create a way to work for themselves. He said, don't look for a job, make a job for yourself.
Right. Now, God bless her soul. Queen Mother Moore was a Garveyite,
Yeah,
correct?
Queen Mother Moore, who was very active in the reparations movement. She was involved in New Orleans initially with the UNIA. And our mother, Queen Mother James, who knew all the President Generals, actually got to see Queen Mother Moore. And I got to meet Queen Mother Moore as well and have stories and talk to her about her Garveyism.
Okay, we're here with Senghor Baye, President General of the UNIA ACL, discussing 100 years of the red, black, and green. You're watching Sankofa Community Affairs with Brother Salim Adofo. We'll be right back.
Different words describe different people. But in the eyes of the law, there's one that fits us all. Human right number 7. We're all equal before the law. What are human rights? Find out at youthforhumanrights.org.
You're back with Brother Salim Adofo. You're watching Sankofa Community Affairs. We have on here the President General, Senghor Baye of the UNIA ACL. This is 100 years of the red, black, and green.
Yeah, it's a centennial year,
Centennial
brother. Very
year.
important. We've been around 100 years, and despite the fact Garvey only spent almost 12 years in the United States and was run out, the UNIA has been consistent ever since, and has gone from, I'm now the 10th successor to Garvey. We've had President General, so we're still around and we still are pushing the same program. Of course, we are adding more creative and technological ways about doing things, but this centennial year, we're striving to motivate our people to understand all black people, north, south, east, and west, are ordinary members. The ones who are extraordinary members are those who pay dues to upkeep the movement.
Now, you said 100 years, and you're the 10th leader of the organization, so that's a lot of stability. But on average, I guess 10 years of president. Now, what exactly is a president general?
Well, a president general is simply the administrator, one who was able to appoint officers like ambassadors, commissioners are like that. But we have a first, second, third, and fourth assistant president general.
Okay.
We have about 25 people in our cabinet, and then we have about 12 ambassadors.
Okay.
So my job and my role is to keep everybody moving collectively and to be a humble servant to the ancestors. That's very important. Leadership means, we taught leadership means pain, blood, and death. It don't mean a Mercedes-Benz. It don't mean a $600,000 a year. What it means is what you do for the people, and listen to the people, learn from the people. So I've learned, as I've grown up for over 30 some odd years in the UNIA, that once you are committed to the ancestors and committed to the people will give you everything you need. So I'm just like a sponge. I take it in, but I also am proud to say that I'm carrying out the works, words, and deeds of not just Garvey, but James Stewart, Harvey, Garvey Jr., who's still alive, by the way, who was the President General for 12 years, Battle, Maddox, Cheryl, and G, and me. So
now you said that you're still carrying out the program. What is the program of the UNIA?
Well, actually, the major program is to raise the consciousness of our brothers and sisters to know that they come from greatness. Okay. They can still be great. The second part is to create our own economic, self-sustaining, and self-reliant ways and means. That's not to say that we are opposed to everybody else, but we don't like what we see going on in a world that's drunk and corrupt. The other point is agriculture. You know, there is no culture, as some folks say, without agriculture. We need to go back to the land. We need to know how to grow our own food. Piggly Wiggly, Safeway, and Giant don't have our best interests at heart, but that's where we are every Saturday. So we need to get back into our yards. Then we need to also take Africa back. Despite the fact the independence of Africa has taken place in the 50s leading up to the early 60s, Africa is still under colonialism. I like to say colonialism, not neocolonialism. All of the same people who carved up Africa during the Berlin Conference are still in Africa. We even got different other people now in Africa. Africa's still the cradle of civilization of all mankind. And as long as the wrong and righteous people are there, taken from Africa, Africa and the righteous people will not be able to rise. We know that change is inevitable. We know that what comes around goes around. And we know we are the first, we'll certainly be the last. We don't romanticize about that, though. We recognize it took a long time to put us in this kind of predicament of mental slavery. It's going to take time to get out. However, Africa is rapidly growing, despite the fact too many Africans are trying to get out of Africa because they forgot to, in Africa, during the transatlantic slave trade, who they are. So we have a task, we have a job. So the deal is bridge. Okay. To get to know one another better, get to be culturally entwined with one another. We come from empires, not states of confusion.
What is Marcus Garvey's relationship to Rastafarianism?
Oh, well, Rastafari actually grew out of Garveyism. Okay. Leonard P. Howe started the Rastafari movement. He was a Garveyite. Okay. Okay, so you can't separate Rastafari, real Rastafari. I ain't talking about Rena-Dreads. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the Bobo Shanti, the 12 tribes, the House of Nyabinghi. All of those are different houses of Rasta. But they'll tell you themselves. They'll be with us in Harlem and New York. Okay. But a lot of people look at Rasta as something distant from the norm. It's just the opposite. A lot of real Rastas deal with the land, deal with the earth, they deal with nature, you know. And so the actual fact of the matter is the Rastafari movement started right out of the Garvey movement, like the Nation of Islam. Okay. I don't want to just be partial, because we say let no religious scruples divide us, no political machinations, but we are also our brother's keeper. And so we love the Moors, we love the Muslims, we love the Rastas, we love the Akan, the Yorubas, the Voodoo, the Christians, and all. But we say let no religious scruples divide us. Now, the Nation of Islam was born in 1930, the same time as Marcus Garvey Jr. was born to Marcus Garvey.
Now, was Malcolm X, wasn't Malcolm X?
Of course, Malcolm X's mother and father, the family, they were Garveyites. They were leaders in the Garvey movement. Okay. And that one of the mistakes that we make as African people is that we take sides. We're not individuals, we're collective. So there is no movements that are serving our people that don't have some direct link with one another. Right. Just like the UNIA came in 1914, before the UNIA, you had a whole slew of brothers and sisters back in the centuries before that that had progressive movements, and back to Africa movements. movements.
Okay.
Some people took people back to Africa. So what we're saying is anybody that grew from us is still us, and we say come back home. And once we have that united front, that's why the National Black United Front is so important.
Right. What are some books that people can read to learn about Marcus Garvey?
We definitely suggest people look at the Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, compiled by Amy Jocks Garvey, writings by Marcus Garvey, okay? Race First by Dr. Tony Martin. It was done in 1976. It's critical because it talks about everything we're talking about now, plus what went wrong in the movement. Critical, and the court case. Then The Message to the People, which is a course Garvey taught himself, started in late 1937, 1938 in Canada. He trained us. That course of African philosophy has 22 lessons in it. Garvey trained 42 lessons. The other 20 lessons sunk in through our ancestral DNA.
Right.
But the 22 lessons that are still published is critical. There are plenty other books that we highly recommend, Amos Wilson, but those three are basic if you want to know Garvey and the UNIA ACL.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Marcus Garvey didn't go get a college degree.
Well, Marcus Garvey did go to college. He did go to university out in California, but no, I mean, in the UK. But Garvey was self-taught. He was a self-taught race-first person. And he was motivated by other scholars. He read everything, man, you know, and when he was in the UK before he came to the United States, that's where he got the vision to set up the government of the UNIACL when he went back to Jamaica. So the question is basically, Garvey was a midnight lamp person where he would read.
Well, the reason why I asked, because I look at gentlemen such as Marcus Garvey or Elijah Muhammad who didn't go through the traditional channels of academia, but yet they were able to put together two of the largest institutions we've ever had in this hemisphere, and probably have had the largest impact and organized the most people.
Exactly, and you know, they were both pushing do for self. So, you know, but our wise educator who had 13 degrees, who I had the opportunity of meeting, told me, he said, no matter how many degrees you get, or no matter how many schools you go to, you got to do your own research to make sure that what you read was true. Because not enough of us are documenting our own story. Our traveling ambassador, Renoko Rashidi, who's traveled to over 100 and some countries, done lectures, he also didn't go to no major fine school, self-taught. J.A. Rogers. So we could go on down the line, but we say get knowledge. And we don't we encourage people to go to school and learn, but do your research. Christopher Columbus did not ever even come to North America, but he's still in the textbooks. So that's a perfect example for you.
But why do you think they were able to be so successful without having, was it because they didn't get corrupted by the academia?
I think that they were motivated by the spirit of their ancestors. I really believe that. You know, Senghor means descendant of the ancestors. You know, I did a couple of years at UDC, University District of Columbia, but I don't have no major degrees, but I've done a lot of studying. I've listened a lot to a lot of the elders who walk with Garvey. So I believe that each one can teach one and each one can reach one. And these universities, unless they're owned and controlled by us, and I don't think you're gonna find, it's hard to find them. You don't know what you're getting taught.
That's true.
So you're being trained in these institutions. You're not necessarily being educated or uplifted.
All right, we got a couple of minutes left. I want you to be able to tell us some of the things that the UNIA are working on now.
The centennial is the big piece. We'll be in Harlem from August the 14th to the 17th for our centennial celebration. We felt it very important to go back to Harlem. I'm going to the UK, several boroughs on July the 30th, and we got people in the UK going to be doing centennial celebrations. Then we hold our convention in Harlem, in Queens, actually Jamaica, which is just outside of Queens, from the 18th through the 21st. The main thing we're doing is going back the trail of the ancestors. I visited Tuskegee. George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, they have to be emulated, not just read about. We have to do the work that they did. Same thing with Nannie Helen Burroughs, Anna Julia Cooper, and we could go on and on and on. If people study what these ancestors left us, Garvey left us a black print, the UNIA, but all black people who've done anything. George Washington Carver took a peanut and a sweet potato and made tons of things. We need to emulate that. Those are the main things the UNIA is doing. Sustainability, teaching our brothers and sisters how they can do for self and kind, and making sure that we understand we all are expatriates. We might have come out of Africa long ago, but Africa is still ours and it's in us.
How do you get more young people to understand the depth of Marcus Garvey? Because he just wasn't saying just get in an organization. He said, up you mighty race, accomplish what you will. What does that really mean?
That's important because our young people need to first be encouraged. They need to be loved. They need to be appreciated. They need to understand that they don't have to fall for the okie doke and get locked up and become comrades in these penitentiaries. They don't have to shoot their brother. There's brothers and sisters out here that love them and will deal with them. And another thing, don't believe the news all the time because a lot of positive things are going on with young people.
Right.
And if we're not dealing with young people, we miss it. They're not our future. They're present.
That's a good point.
They're the present, and we deal with the present, and they will help build the future. But you got to deal with the present. And too many of our children are crying and dying. Our ancestors are waiting and watching, and we still too apathetic to understand. We always want to just blame the system of white supremacy. That could not even exist if it were not for our own apathy for not knowing who we are.
All right, Bob, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Yes, sir.
We're running out of time, but can you please tell people how to get in contact with you?
www.uniacl.org or www.unia-centennial.org. Main way to get with us. You can always Google UNIA-ACL, but make sure you get to the authentic source because we out here and we definitely will respond. Celebrate the centennial wherever you are.
Yes, sir. This is Brother Salim Adofo. You're watching Sankofa Community Affairs, 100 years of the red, black, and green. God bless you.